In a quiet little town, nestled on the edge of a bustling city, there lived a woman named Clara Simmons. At 32 years old, Clara led an ordinary life. She worked as an accountant, spending her days surrounded by numbers and spreadsheets. Her evenings were usually spent curled up with a book or watching TV alone in her small apartment. Clara wasn't someone who stood out in a crowd. She was soft-spoken, reserved, and often preferred to stay in the background. But deep inside, she carried a longing for something more, something that would make her feel alive again. Clara's life had recently taken a turn when her long-term relationship ended abruptly. The breakup left her feeling lost and unsure of herself. For weeks, she wandered through her days like a ghost, questioning whether she'd ever find her footing again. It was during one of these low moments that she stumbled upon an advertisement. At her local gym, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes starting soon. Intrigued but hesitant, Clara stared at the flyer for what felt like hours. Could she really do this? Martial arts seemed so far removed from her world of calculators and coffee breaks, yet something about it called to her, a chance to reinvent herself, to prove that she could be stronger than she thought. After days of deliberating, Clara finally mustered the courage to sign up. On the morning of her first class, she woke, up early, her stomach churning with nerves. She rummaged through her closet trying to find something suitable to wear. All she could come up with was an old pair of sweatpants and a borrowed GI, the traditional uniform for jiu-jitsu, that belonged to her cousin. The GI was too big, its sleeves hanging past her wrists, but Clara didn't care. She tied the belt tightly around her waist, hoping it would hold everything together, not just the GI, but also her fragile confidence. When Clara arrived at the gym, she felt completely out of place. The room buzzed with energy as students stretched and warmed up on the mats. Most of them looked like they belonged there, young, athletic, and confident. Clara, on the other hand, felt awkward and clumsy. She tried to blend into the corner, avoiding eye contact with anyone. That's when Coach Ramirez noticed her. He was a tall man with a warm smile and a no-nonsense attitude. "You must be Clara," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome to the team." Coach Ramirez gave her a quick rundown of what to expect during the session. He explained the basics of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, emphasizing that it was all about technique rather than brute strength. To Clara, this sounded promising. Maybe she wouldn't have to rely on physical power after all. Still, as she stepped onto the mat for the first time, she couldn't shake off the feeling that everyone was watching her and judging her. Her fears weren't entirely unfounded. As Clara struggled to follow along with the drills, some of the more experienced students began whispering among themselves. One voice stood out above the rest. Marcus, a blue belt with a cocky grin and a reputation for being brutally honest, sometimes to the point of cruelty. "Look at this," he said loudly enough for Clara to hear. "Hope she's ready to get tossed around." His words stung, but Clara pretended not to notice. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, determined to show up for herself even if no one else believed in her. The class moved quickly, and soon it was time for sparring. Clara was paired with another beginner, a young woman named Sarah. Though both were equally inexperienced, Clara found herself overwhelmed. Every time she tried to defend herself, Sarah managed to slip past her guard and pin her down. Each submission felt like a blow to her already fragile ego. By the end of the session, Clara was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. As she sat on the sidelines catching her breath, she overheard Marcus laughing with his friends. "She should stick to yoga," he quipped. "This isn't her scene." Despite the mockery, Clara refused to let it break her. Something inside her stirred, a quiet determination that whispered, "I can do this." She reminded herself why she had come here in the first place, not to impress anyone but to reclaim a piece of herself that had been missing for far too long. With that thought, she resolved to keep showing up, no matter how hard it got. Tlatlam. Did she know her journey was only beginning, and the lessons she would learn on the mat would change her life forever? Clara's early days in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu were anything but easy. Each class felt like a test of her patience, endurance, and willpower. She would arrive at the gym with sweaty palms and a racing heart, knowing full well that she was stepping into a world where she didn't belong yet. The mat, once a foreign territory, became both her battlefield and her sanctuary. But every time she stepped onto it, she faced challenges that pushed her to her limits and sometimes beyond. The first hurdle was mastering the basics. Coach Ramirez often emphasized the importance of fundamentals, saying, if you don't have a strong foundation, everything else will crumble. For Clara, this meant learning how to move her body in ways she never thought possible. There were days when simply getting into the right posture felt like an impossible task. Guard positions, sweeps, submissions. It all seemed like a confusing jumble of limbs and techniques. Her muscles ached from unfamiliar movements, and her mind struggled to keep up with the instructions. During one particularly grueling session, Clara found herself tangled up in what felt like a human pretzel. While trying to execute a basic armbar, she froze mid-motion, unsure of what to do next. Coach Ramirez knelt beside her, gently guiding her through the steps. Relax your hips, he instructed. Focus on controlling his arm, not forcing it. Simple advice, but for Clara, it might as well have been written in another language. Frustration bubbled inside her as she failed to complete the move, and she could feel her face flushing red with embarrassment. But it wasn't just the physical aspect that made things difficult. It was also the mental toll. Every mistake, every failed attempt chipped away at her confidence. And then there was Marcus, whose constant snide remarks didn't help matters. He had taken it upon himself to comment on Clara's progress, or lack thereof, at every opportunity. Wow, is that supposed to be a choke? He joked during one class, earning chuckles from his friends. Another time, after she got pinned yet again, he leaned over and said, maybe stick to puzzles, huh? At least they're easier to solve. At first, Clara let these comments eat away at her. She replayed them in her head long after leaving the gym, wondering if maybe Marcus was right. Was she wasting her time? Could someone like her, someone who had never been athletic or competitive, really excel in such a demanding sport? Doubts swirled around her mind like storm clouds, threatening to drown her resolve. Yet despite the negativity, something kept pulling her back to the mat week after week. What no one knew, not even Coach Ramirez, was the effort Clara put in outside of class. Late at night, when the rest of the world was asleep, she sat cross-legged on her living room floor, watching instructional videos on her laptop. She studied every detail, pausing and rewinding clips to catch nuances she might have missed. Slowly, she began piecing together the puzzle of Jiu-Jitsu, connecting techniques she'd learned in class with the ones she saw online. Her coffee table became cluttered with notebooks filled with scribbled diagrams and reminders. Keep elbows tight. Control the center line. She also practiced relentlessly. Using pillows and blankets as makeshift partners, Clara drilled transitions and escapes until her knees were bruised and raw. Sometimes she'd collapse onto the floor, exhausted but satisfied, knowing she was inching closer to improvement. These late-night sessions gave her a sense of control she hadn't felt in years. They reminded her that growth wasn't always visible to others. It happened quietly behind closed doors, in moments no one else witnessed. Despite her private efforts, progress in class came slowly. During sparring rounds, Clara still found herself getting tapped out within seconds. Her opponents, even those at her level, moved with a fluidity she couldn't match. More often than not, she ended up flat on her back, staring up at the ceiling, wondering where she went wrong. It was frustrating, demoralizing, and exhausting, but strangely, it was also addictive. Each failure fueled her determination to try harder, to push further. One evening, after a particularly tough session, Coach Ramirez pulled Clara aside. "You're doing okay," he said, his tone encouraging but measured. "But I think you need to focus on smaller goals. Don't worry about winning right now. Just work on surviving longer on the mat." His words struck a chord with Clara. She realized she had been so fixated on perfection that she hadn't allowed herself to celebrate the small victories. Surviving an extra 10 seconds in someone's guard? That was progress. Escaping a hold without panicking? That was progress too. With this new perspective, Clara started approaching each class differently. Instead of comparing herself to others, she focused on improving her own game. She asked questions, sought feedback, and paid close attention to the details. Gradually, she noticed subtle changes. Her movements became smoother, her reactions faster. She was still far from perfect, but she was getting better, and that realization gave her hope. Still, not everyone shared her optimism. Marcus continued to mock her openly, though his comments carried less weight now. Clara had learned to tune him out, focusing instead on the sound of her own breathing and the rhythm of her heartbeat. Occasionally, she caught glimpses of admiration in the eyes of her fellow students. Sarah, the girl she'd sparred with during her first class, approached her one day and said, "You've come a long way. Keep going." Those few words meant more to Clara than she could express. As weeks turned into months, Clara's transformation became undeniable. She wasn't just showing up anymore, she was thriving. Her technique improved, her confidence grew, and her love for the sport deepened. What started as a tentative step into the unknown had blossomed into a passion that consumed her thoughts and fueled her spirit. Little did she know, her hard work was about to pay off in ways she never imagined. It was a chilly Tuesday evening when everything changed for Clara. The gym buzzed with its usual energy, the mats filled with students warming up and chatting before class began. Clara arrived feeling more confident than she had in weeks. She'd been practicing tirelessly, refining her techniques, and focusing on the small improvements that Coach Ramirez had encouraged her to celebrate. Still, she couldn't shake the lingering doubt that whispered in the back of her mind. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail again? The warm-up drills passed quickly, and soon it was time for sparring. Coach Ramirez clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "All right, partners," he called out, scanning the room. Clara braced herself, knowing she'd likely be paired with someone close to her skill level, another beginner, or perhaps an intermediate student. But then something unexpected happened. "Marcus," Coach Ramirez said, pointing to the cocky blue belt lounging near the corner of the mat. "Switch with Clara." Clara froze. Her heart skipped a beat as all eyes turned toward her. Marcus smirked, cracking his knuckles as he stood up. He sauntered over to where Clara waited, his expression dripping with condescension. "All right, little lady," he said loud enough for others to hear. "Let's see what you've got." For a moment, Clara felt like retreating. The weight of everyone's stares pressed down on her, and Marcus's arrogance made her stomach churn. But then she remembered why she was here, to prove something to herself, not to him. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, tying her belt tighter around her waist. This wasn't just about winning or losing, it was about showing up, staying calm, and trusting the work she'd put in. They bowed to each other and tapped fists, signaling the start of the match. Marcus came out aggressively, lunging forward with a series of quick movements designed to overwhelm her. His strategy was clear: overpower her early and end the round fast. Clara stumbled under his initial attack, struggling to keep her guard intact. Her mind raced as she tried to recall the techniques she'd practiced late at night. Stay calm, she reminded herself. Use his momentum against him. As Marcus attempted to pass her guard, Clara saw her opening. Instead of resisting his force, she flowed with it, shifting her hips smoothly to create space. In one fluid motion, she wrapped her legs around his arm and locked in a tight triangle choke, a technique she'd drilled countless times on her living room floor. Marcus froze, caught off guard by the sudden transition. Before he could react, Clara adjusted her position, squeezing her thighs together to tighten the hold. The entire gym fell silent. No one moved. No one spoke. All eyes were glued to the mat as Marcus tapped sharply on Clara's leg. It was over in seconds. Clara released the hold immediately, her chest rising and falling as she processed what had just happened. Had she really done it? Had she just submitted Marcus, a blue belt who had mocked her relentlessly? Marcus sat up, his face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. Without saying a word, he muttered something under his breath and stormed off the mat, leaving behind a stunned audience. Clara remained seated, her hands trembling slightly as reality sank in. She hadn't just survived the round, she'd won. Against all odds, she had proven herself. The silence in the room was broken by Coach Ramirez's voice. "Good job, Clara," he said, clapping enthusiastically. His praise seemed to snap everyone out of their shock. Slowly, the other students began applauding, some nodding in approval while others exchanged surprised glances. Clara glanced around, unsure of how to feel. A part of her wanted to celebrate, but another part worried about the backlash. Would Marcus retaliate? Would the others resent her for embarrassing him? Despite the uncertainty, Clara allowed herself a small smile. For the first time since joining the gym, she felt a flicker of pride, not because she had beaten Marcus, but because she had faced her fear and come out stronger. The victory wasn't just physical, it was emotional. It was proof that hard work, patience, and resilience could overcome even the toughest obstacles. After class, Clara packed up her gear quietly, avoiding eye contact with the other students. She didn't want to make a scene or draw unnecessary attention to herself. As she walked toward the exit, Sarah, the same girl who had sparred with her during her first class, stopped her. "That was incredible," Sarah said genuinely. "You showed us all what you're made of." Clara nodded, still processing the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. "Thanks," she replied softly. I don't know what came over me." "You earned it," Sarah insisted. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Clara left the gym that night with a mix of excitement and apprehension. On one hand, she felt unstoppable, like she had finally broken through the invisible barrier holding her back. On the other hand, she knew this victory wouldn't go unnoticed, and not everyone would take it well. Marcus's reaction lingered, in her mind, a reminder that success often invites criticism. But as she lay in bed later that night, replaying the match in her head, Clara realized something important. Winning wasn't about proving herself to others. It was about believing in herself. That brief moment on the mat had taught her more than any drill or sparring session ever could. It had shown her that she was capable of far more than she'd imagined. Little did Clara know, this was only the beginning. The ripple effect of her victory would spread throughout the gym, challenging perceptions and inspiring others, including herself, to push beyond their limits. And though challenges lay ahead, Clara was ready to face them head-on, armed with newfound confidence and a determination to keep growing. The victory over Marcus became the talk of the gym almost instantly. News traveled fast among the tight-knit community of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, and by the next class, everyone seemed to have an opinion about what had happened. Some students congratulated Clara, offering genuine smiles and words of encouragement. Others remained skeptical, whispering that it had been a fluke, that Marcus must have underestimated her or gone easy on her. Clara tried not to let the chatter bother her, but she couldn't help noticing how the atmosphere around her had shifted. For the first time since joining the gym, people started paying attention to her. During drills, her partners approached with a newfound respect, testing her skills more seriously than before. Even Coach Ramirez began assigning her tougher opponents during sparring sessions, clearly wanting to see if her performance against Marcus was a one-time miracle or a sign of real growth. Clara welcomed the challenge, determined to prove that her victory hadn't been luck. It was the result of months of relentless effort and dedication. But not everyone was ready to accept her progress. Marcus, for one, avoided sparring with her altogether. Whenever Coach Ramirez suggested pairing them up again, Marcus would conveniently claim he needed water or pretend to stretch until someone else took his place. His behavior irritated some of the other students who saw it as cowardly, but Clara didn't dwell on it. She knew Marcus wasn't the focus anymore. Her goal was to keep improving, regardless of whether he acknowledged her abilities or not. Weeks turned into months. Clara's confidence soared. Her technique sharpened, her reflexes quickened, and her understanding of the sport deepened. She no longer felt like an outsider looking in. She belonged on the mat, holding her own against opponents of all levels. The bruises and sore muscles were badges of honor now, proof of the battles she'd fought and won. More importantly, she carried herself differently off the mat too. The once shy accountant walked taller, spoke louder, and smiled more freely. Her transformation was undeniable, even to those who had doubted her at first. One evening after class, Coach Ramirez pulled Clara aside. "You've come a long way," he said, his tone serious but kind. "I can tell you're putting in the work and it's paying off. How would you feel about competing?" Clara blinked, caught off guard by the question. Competing? The idea had never crossed her mind. Sure, she'd dreamed of getting better, maybe even earning her blue belt someday, but stepping onto a competition mat against strangers seemed like a whole different level of pressure. I don't know, she admitted hesitantly. "I've never done anything like that before." Coach Ramirez nodded as if he'd expected her response. "It's okay to be nervous," he said, "but think about it. You've already proven you can handle tough situations, and besides, it's not just about winning. It's about testing yourself, seeing where you stand, and learning from the experience." Clara mulled over his words that night as she lay in bed. Was she ready to take such a big step? Could she really compete against seasoned fighters who had years of experience under their belts? Doubts crept in, whispering that she might embarrass herself or get hurt. But then she remembered the feeling of submitting Marcus, the rush of adrenaline, the pride of knowing she'd earned every bit of that victory. Maybe it was worth taking the risk. A few days later, Clara told Coach Ramirez she was willing to give it a try. He grinned, clearly pleased with her decision. "Good," he said. "There's an inner gym challenge coming up in 2 months. It's not a formal tournament, but it'll give you a taste of what competing is like. You'll face higher-ranked opponents, so we'll need to prepare you properly." And prepare they did. Over the next several weeks, Clara trained harder than ever before. Coach Ramirez designed a rigorous regimen tailored specifically for her strengths and weaknesses. They worked on refining her submissions, improving her defense, and building her endurance. Sparring sessions became more intense, with Clara facing advanced students, including black belts, to simulate the conditions she'd encountered during the challenge. At times, the workload felt overwhelming, leaving her exhausted and questioning whether she'd made the right choice. But whenever doubt crept in, she reminded herself why she'd started this journey in the first place. To push past her limits and discover what she was truly capable of. The day of the challenge finally arrived. Clara woke up early, her nerves buzzing like static electricity. She dressed carefully, tying her belt with deliberate precision, as if the act itself could steady her racing heart. When she arrived at the venue, a large gymnasium filled with mats and spectators, she felt both excited and terrified. The air buzzed with energy, the sound of laughter and friendly banter mingling with the thud of bodies hitting the mat. Clara scanned the crowd, spotting familiar faces from her gym cheering her on. Their presence calmed her slightly, reminding her that she wasn't alone. Her first match was against a purple belt named Lisa, known for her aggressive style and lightning-fast submissions. As they bowed and shook hands, Clara focused on her breathing, trying to block out the noise around her. The referee signaled the start of the match, and Lisa came out strong, launching into a series of attacks designed to overwhelm her opponent. Clara stayed calm, using her guard to neutralize Lisa's advances. Every movement felt deliberate, every decision calculated. Though Lisa managed to pass her guard briefly, Clara escaped with a textbook sweep, earning points and shifting the momentum in her favor. By the time the match ended, Clara had narrowly lost on points, but she walked off the mat with her head held high. She had held her own against a highly skilled opponent, proving to herself that she could compete at a higher level. Her teammates greeted her with applause, their cheers echoing in her ears. "You did great," Sarah exclaimed, giving her a hug. "That was incredible." But the highlight of the day came during her second match. This time her opponent was Ryan Carter, a black belt from another gym renowned for his technical mastery. Clara knew this would be her toughest test yet. As she stepped onto the mat, she reminded herself of everything she'd learned. Stay calm, trust your instincts, and fight smart, not hard. The match began with Ryan taking control, methodically working to pass Clara's guard. But Clara refused to panic. She waited patiently for her opening, conserving her energy while studying his movements. Then, in a moment of opportunity, she transitioned seamlessly into a Kimura, a submission she'd practiced countless times. Ryan resisted for a split second, but Clara tightened the hold with precision. To everyone's astonishment, he tapped out, and just like that, it was over. 14 seconds. That's all it took. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Clara released the hold, stunned by what had happened. Ryan gave her a respectful nod, acknowledging her skill. Back at her corner, her teammates swarmed her, hugging her and shouting congratulations. For the first time in her life, Clara felt like a true warrior, not because she had beaten a black belt, but because she had faced her fears and emerged victorious. When she returned to her own gym the following week, the atmosphere had changed, completely. Those who had doubted her now looked at her with admiration. Marcus approached her after class, his expression uncharacteristically humble. "You were right all along," he admitted. "I shouldn't have underestimated you." Clara smiled, not out of triumph, but because she understood the journey he was on. Everyone had moments of doubt and growth. It was part of being human. Clara's life outside the gym transformed too. She quit her accounting job to pursue teaching martial arts full-time, finding joy in helping others discover their strength. What started as a personal quest for confidence had blossomed into a passion for inspiring others. And though she never sought fame or recognition, Clara's story became legendary in the local BJJ community, a testament to the power of perseverance, humility, and resilience. The victory over Ryan Carter, the black belt, became the stuff of legends in Clara's gym, and beyond. Word spread like wildfire through the local Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community, with people marveling at how a relatively unknown white belt had managed to tap out one of the most respected fighters in just 14 seconds. Videos of the match surfaced online, shared by spectators who had been lucky enough to witness it firsthand. Comments poured in from practitioners across the country, some praising Clara's technique, others questioning whether Ryan had let her win. But no matter what anyone said, one thing was undeniable. Clara Simmons was no longer an underdog. She was a rising star. Back at her home gym, the atmosphere shifted overnight. Those who had once doubted her now looked at her with newfound respect. Even Marcus, who had mocked her relentlessly during her early days, began treating her differently. He avoided sparring with her altogether, claiming he didn't want to risk injury before an upcoming competition. While some found his behavior amusing, Clara didn't dwell on it. She knew better than to waste energy worrying about those who had underestimated her. Instead, she focused on what mattered most: continuing to grow and improve. Coach Ramirez wasted no time capitalizing on Clara's newfound confidence. "You've got potential," he told her after the intergym challenge. "But this is just the beginning. If you want to take your skills to the next level, we need to push harder." Clara nodded eagerly, ready for whatever came next. With days, each passing week her training intensified. Sparring sessions became more challenging, drills more precise, and conditioning exercises more grueling. Yet despite the physical demands, Clara thrived. Every drop of sweat, every bruise, every moment of exhaustion felt like fuel for her fire. One day, Coach Ramirez approached her with a proposition that made her heart skip a beat. "There's a regional tournament coming up in 3 months," he said. "I think you're ready for it." Clara hesitated, memories of her first competitive experience flooding back. The inter-gym challenge had been thrilling, but also nerve-wracking. A formal tournament would be an entirely different beast with stricter rules, tougher opponents, and larger crowds. Could she handle it? "I don't know if I'm ready for something this big," she admitted, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "You won't be ready unless you try," Coach Ramirez replied firmly. "Look, I'm not saying it'll be easy, but you've already proven you can rise to the occasion when it matters most. Trust me, you've got what it takes." Clara spent hours weighing the decision. On one hand, competing meant stepping far outside her comfort zone, facing opponents who were bigger, stronger, and more experienced. On the other hand, it was an opportunity to test herself in ways she never had before. to see how far she could go. Eventually, she realized that fear wasn't a reason to say no. It was a reason to say yes. So, with a deep breath and a determined nod, she agreed to sign up. The weeks leading up to the tournament flew by in a blur of intense preparation. Clara's daily routine revolved around training, studying techniques, and visualizing success. She watched videos of past tournaments, analyzing the strategies of top competitors. She drilled transitions until her muscles burned and practiced mental exercises to stay calm under pressure. Her teammates rallied around her, offering support and encouragement. Sarah, who had become one of her closest friends, helped her rehearse scenarios they thought might arise during matches. "You've got this," Sarah reminded her constantly. "Just trust yourself." On the morning of the tournament, Clara woke up before dawn, her stomach churning with nerves. As she packed her gear and tied her belt, she repeated a mantra to herself. Stay calm, stay focused, trust the process. When she arrived at the venue, a sprawling convention center filled with mats and spectators, she felt both excited and terrified. The energy in the room was electric, a mix of anticipation and adrenaline. Competitors stretched and warmed up while coaches shouted instructions. Parents cheered for their children, and friends hugged each other tightly before stepping onto the mat. Clara's first match was against a seasoned blue belt named Jessica, known for her aggressive style and relentless pace. As they bowed and shook hands, Clara reminded herself to breathe deeply and focus on her game plan. The referee signaled the start of the match, and Jessica came out strong, launching into a series of attacks designed to overwhelm her opponent. Clara stayed composed, using her guard to neutralize Jessica's advances. Every movement felt deliberate, every decision calculated. Though Jessica managed to pass her guard briefly, Clara escaped with a textbook sweep, earning points and shifting the momentum in her favor. By the time the match ended, Clara had secured a narrow victory. Exhausted but elated, she walked off the mat to thunderous applause from her teammates. "That was amazing," Sarah exclaimed, pulling her into a tight hug. "You owned that match." As the day progressed, Clara faced increasingly difficult opponents, each battle testing her endurance, strategy, and resolve. In her third match, she found herself pitted against a purple belt named Elena, whose technical prowess and lightning-fast submissions intimidated even seasoned competitors. The match was brutal, with Elena dominating much of the action. But Clara refused to give up. She clawed her way back from disadvantageous positions, earning points with clever escapes and well-timed sweeps. Though she ultimately lost on points, she left the mat with her head held high, knowing she had fought valiantly. By the end of the day, Clara hadn't won the tournament, but she had earned something far more valuable: respect. Her performance caught the attention of coaches, competitors, and spectators alike, many of whom praised her resilience and skill. One veteran black belt approached her after her final match, shaking her hand warmly. "You've got grit," he said. "Keep going. You'll go far." When Clara returned to her gym the following week, she was greeted as a hero. Her teammates cheered, clapping and whistling as she walked in. Marcus, who had once mocked her mercilessly, offered a rare compliment. "You proved us all wrong. Good job." Clara smiled, not because she craved validation, but because she understood the journey they were all on. Everyone had moments of growth and transformation. It was part of being human. Inspired by her progress, Clara decided to take her passion for Jiu-Jitsu to the next level. She began assisting Coach Ramirez with beginner classes, sharing her knowledge and experiences with newcomers. Watching students struggle and triumph reminded her of her own journey, the doubts, the setbacks, and the victories that had shaped her into the person she was today. Teaching gave her a sense of purpose she'd never felt in her old accounting job, and soon, she made the bold decision to leave her corporate career behind and pursue martial arts full-time. Her life outside the gym transformed too. Clara started mentoring young girls interested in self-defense, encouraging them to embrace their strength and resilience. She gave talks at local schools and community centers, sharing her story of perseverance and determination. What had begun as a personal quest for confidence had blossomed into a mission to inspire others to believe in themselves. Though Clara never sought fame or recognition, her story resonated deeply with people. It served as a reminder that greatness isn't defined by natural talent or physical prowess. It's built through hard work, humility, and an unwavering belief in oneself. And as she stood on the mat, teaching her students and preparing for her next challenge, Clara knew she had finally found her place in the world. Months had passed since Clara's journey in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu began, and her transformation was nothing short of remarkable. What started as a tentative step onto the mat to rebuild her confidence had evolved into a lifelong passion that touched every corner of her life. She no longer saw herself as the shy, uncertain woman who had walked into the gym all those months ago. In her place stood someone stronger, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And now, she was ready to share that strength with others. Clara's decision to leave her accounting job and dedicate herself fully to teaching martial arts marked a turning point in her life. At first, the transition felt daunting. The stability of a 9-to-5 job was gone, replaced by the unpredictability of building a career in a field she was still growing into. But Clara embraced the challenge with the same determination that had carried her through her toughest matches. She spent hours crafting lesson plans, studying different teaching methods, and tailoring her approach to suit students of all ages and skill levels. Her classes quickly gained popularity, drawing in beginners eager to learn and seasoned practitioners looking to refine their techniques. One evening, as Clara led a beginner's class, she couldn't help but notice a familiar face among the new arrivals. It was Marcus. He stood near the back of the room, his usual swagger replaced by an air of humility. When their eyes met, he gave her a small nod before stepping onto the mat. Clara smiled faintly, remembering how far they'd both come since their rocky start. After class, Marcus approached her hesitantly. "I wanted to say thanks," he admitted. "You inspired me to rethink my attitude, not just about jiu-jitsu, but about life. I shouldn't have underestimated you or anyone else." Clara nodded, accepting his words without judgment. "We all make mistakes," she said simply. "What matters is what we do after we realize them." Marcus left that night with a renewed sense of purpose, vowing to train harder and treat others with more respect. Watching him walk away, Clara felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Teaching wasn't just about passing on techniques, it was about fostering growth, compassion, and resilience in others. As word of Clara's expertise spread, opportunities began pouring in. Local schools invited her to give workshops on self-defense, emphasizing the importance of confidence and awareness. Community centers asked her to speak at events aimed at empowering women and girls. Clara poured her heart into these initiatives, knowing firsthand how transformative martial arts could be for those seeking strength and courage. One particular workshop stuck with her: a group of teenage girls from underprivileged backgrounds who were hesitant at first, but gradually opened up under her guidance. By the end of the session, they were laughing, cheering each other on, and proudly demonstrating the moves they'd learned. Seeing their smiles reminded Clara why she had chosen this path. Her impact extended beyond the mats as well. Clara became a role model in her community, not just for her achievements in jiu-jitsu, but for her resilience and authenticity. People admired her willingness to embrace vulnerability, to admit when she didn't know something, and to keep pushing forward, despite setbacks. Parents brought their children to her classes, hoping they would learn discipline and perseverance. Friends recommended her to colleagues struggling to find balance in their lives. Even strangers reached out online, sharing how her story had inspired them to pursue their own dreams. Despite her growing reputation, Clara remained grounded. She knew success wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about making a difference, however small. Whether it was helping a nervous newcomer execute their first sweep or offering advice to a fellow teacher navigating challenges, Clara approached everything with kindness and humility. Her philosophy was simple: everyone has potential. Sometimes, they just need someone to believe in them. One day, Coach Ramirez called her aside after class. "You've done incredible work here," he said, pride evident in his voice. "But I think it's time you took the next step. Have you ever thought about opening your own gym?" The idea caught Clara off guard. Running her own space sounded like a dream, but also a monumental responsibility. Could she handle it? Would people trust her enough to follow? After much deliberation, Clara decided to take the leap. With the support of her friends, family, and students, she secured a modest location on the edge of town and transformed it into a welcoming dojo. The walls were painted in calming blues and greens, adorned with motivational quotes and photos of her journey. There were mats for sparring, weights for conditioning, and even a small library stocked with books on mindfulness and personal development. On opening day, the room buzzed with excitement as dozens of people gathered to celebrate. Some were longtime students, others newcomers curious about what Clara had to offer. As she stood at the front of the room, addressing the crowd, tears welled up in her eyes. "I never imagined I'd be here," she confessed, her voice steady despite the emotion. "When I first stepped onto a mat, I didn't think I belonged. I doubted myself at every turn. But over time, I realized something important. None of us are born strong. We become strong through effort, patience, and support. That's what this place is about, a community where everyone can grow, learn, and thrive together." The applause that followed was deafening, a testament to the impact Clara had made on so many lives. Over the weeks and months that followed, her gym flourished. Students ranged from young children learning discipline to adults seeking stress relief to retirees looking to stay active. Each person brought their unique story, and Clara welcomed them all with open arms. She encouraged her advanced students to mentor beginners, fostering a culture of mutual respect and collaboration. Her dream of creating a safe, inclusive space had come true, and it only grew stronger with time. Yet, Clara's journey wasn't without its challenges. Running a business required sacrifices, long hours, and constant problem-solving. There were days when she questioned whether she'd made the right choice, moments when the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. But whenever doubt crept in, she reminded herself of the lessons she'd learned on the mat: perseverance, adaptability, and trust in the process. These principles guided her not just in Jiu-Jitsu but in life itself. Years later, as Clara reflected on her journey, she marveled at how far she'd come. From the quiet accountant unsure of her place in the world to the confident leader inspiring others to find their strength, her transformation was proof that change was always possible. Her legacy wasn't defined by trophies or titles, but by the countless lives she had touched along the way. Young girls grew up seeing her as a role model. Adults rediscovered their passion for fitness and self-improvement. Even skeptics like Marcus found redemption and purpose through her guidance. On a quiet afternoon, as Clara sat in her office overlooking the bustling gym, she picked up a framed photo from her desk. It was a picture of her bowing on the mat during her very first match against Ryan Carter, the black belt she had tapped out in 14 seconds. She smiled, remembering the whirlwind of emotions she had felt that day. Back then, she had been focused solely on proving herself. Now she understood that true victory wasn't about defeating others. It was about overcoming your own fears, doubts, and limitations. It was about becoming the best version of yourself one step at a time. And as she looked out at the sea of faces training below, laughing, sweating, and growing together, Clara knew she had found her purpose. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who dared to dream, to fight, and to rise above.